Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining this afternoon's panel. I'd just like to introduce myself. My name is Vicky Tatnall and I work for the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority in the Diversity and Inclusion team. I'm going to come to the panel now and I'd like each of you to introduce yourself. So I'll go across the top of my screen. So Phil, if we start with you.
Yes,
just a brief introduction. Introduce yourself, your role, where you are and your teams in terms of working as we transition back to the workplace.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon all. Phil Sinclair. I'm the maintenance manager at Hinkley Point C Nuclear Power Station, which is a new power station being built in Somerset in the southwest of England by EDF and China General Nuclear. For a majority of the pandemic, our workforce has been on site constructing, as you can imagine, in a controlled way. And my area of the organisation is much more around office-based staff. So for probably the last 3 months, we've been working through a transition to getting those office-based staff more in the workplace than not. And currently we're looking at around about 3 days per week and then evolving our hybrid working arrangements.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. Vim, should we come to you next?
Yes, hello. My name is Vimbai Frederick and I work for the Submarine Delivery Agency, which is part of the Ministry of Defence. I am the chief engineer for the submarine refit complex at Devonport within the Devonport infrastructure team. And I support the defuel project as well as maintenance for A-class boats. Part of my engineers are based at Devonport. I'm mostly working from home with occasional travel to Devonport. However, my engineers who live in Plymouth prefer to go in to keep abreast of the progress being made on the project and to engage face-to-face with the supplier.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Vim. And Richard, come to you.
Hi everyone, I'm Richard Green. I joined the NDA in March 21 as the director of the corporate centre, effectively the group headquarters. It was a new role that was designed to bring together all the cross-functional concerns that hit the headquarters. Part of my role has been to manage the response and recovery from COVID, so I've had teams around the country that are helping to do that, but much as in similar sort of situation to Phil, I've largely got office-based workers. Part of my role has been to coordinate the wider COVID response from across the group, so looking at all the site-based teams as well. But I am particularly in charge of or looking after the security and resilience teams, hence why I got the COVID job, also the facilities management teams, the business support teams. So a lot of what I do is linked into office-based workers that are dotted around the country. But much as everybody else, we've been working remotely for most of the COVID period.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, panel. So we'll come to our first question then. So I just want to pose this question about what does your organisation identify as the challenges for our new ways of working in a more hybrid environment? So I don't know who wants to take that question first.
I'm happy to start. Vicky. So as an organisation, we pivoted really quickly into the new ways of working. We provided some additional supported ICT systems and really delivered or tried to focus on delivering well-being, caring for our staff, keeping that at the forefront. As an office-based organisation, you might argue we haven't really lost any productivity over this last year and a half, but there's certainly been things that have become more challenging. I think that plays into some of the response to that question. So in terms of some of the challenges for the new ways of working, much like a lot of other organizations, we're struggling with understanding how do we engage our staff, even if some are working remotely? How do we ensure people are included when there are some people who are in a room or in an office such as I am today and other people are working remotely? And so that you get interaction by everybody all the time. That then links into, how do we build the culture of the organization and ensure that all staff feel part of that organization going forward? How can they feel that they contribute to our mission delivery, which is critical to what we're doing? And then the final element, I guess, is we've really worked hard to try and understand how we might reimagine our future going forward and how these things might work. But I think there's a recognition that this is still a bit of an experiment for us. So, testing it, adjusting ideas as they go along, and then, if it doesn't work, not being afraid to stop it and do something different, I think is critical. And that's not always a natural space that we as an organisation have been in, I think.
Yeah. What about yourself, Phil, Vim?
Yeah,
Challenges?
Again, I'm not going to repeat what Richard said because, no surprises, a lot of similarities, I would guess, for all of us. I think undoubtedly there will have been some performance shortfalls over the last 18 months, nothing chronic, I wouldn't think, but, with people working remotely and separated by, physical distance, I think we will have lost something as a result of lack of inclusion, lack of collaboration. I think it would be absolutely remiss of us if we didn't build on the benefits which this opportunity has afforded us, though. We as a nation, as a planet, got thrown into it, didn't we, 18 months ago? And undoubtedly for both employees and our organisations, there have been benefits. So we should seek to build on those benefits. Also, probably I think the reimagine word was great that Richard used, work out how we can build on those benefits for the good of the organisation and the good of the employee. I was fortunate enough in the last 2 days to be on a leadership reconnect in London, the first face-to-face meeting of that nature in EDF in recent times, and just the ability to interact with people in a normal way, those corridor conversations, things that spark up over coffee breaks that are just impossible to do over forums like this. I think that's what we've lost. So it'd be really lazy of us to go back to the 9 to 5, 5 days a week. But I think it would also be probably slightly blinded to think that there aren't things that need a little bit of correction from the last 18 months as well.
Yeah. And Vim, coming to you, any extra challenges, additional challenges that you faced?
I think to start with, the organisation, I must comment, we're very quick to adjust to exactly what Richard has explained, providing IT, etc. I think the challenges were that in our kind of organisation where there's some jobs that are security orientated, and therefore some people may not have had the opportunity to work from home because they needed access to secret information, for example, which you can't do from home or remotely. So in instances like that, some people still had to go back to work. And also, obviously, the other challenge was trying to make sure that although people at home have the IT, etc., they have reasonable adjustments because everybody has different needs, but making sure those were addressed. But the challenge is now, I think, is trying to go back to the office, because a lot of people have now adapted to working remotely, and trying to get them back into the office is going to be another challenge, because they have adapted, they have found it more efficient in that maybe they're more productive because they don't have those side conversations they would have had in the office. You're not constantly bumping into a colleague each time you walk through the door, or someone's not constantly asking you questions. However, on the other side of things, we've had a lot of new people come in, and although IT was delivered on time, etc., I think it also takes time to try and get someone up to speed, because everything is done remotely. If it was in the office, it would be a lot quicker because there would be someone there to help them settle in or ask questions and settle into the new job.
Yeah. You touched on in your answer about coming back into the workplace and transitioning back into a physical workplace. So, you know, just thinking about the challenges and what your organization is doing to be able to allow people to come back in and setting it up. So what was the role of the leader in addressing those issues as we transition back to the workplace? What do you feel that the leader's role is in that? Vim, you can carry on talking.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the role of the leader is obviously to become more transformational rather than transactional, where they need to realize that everybody has different needs. So if you, for example, start to mandate people to come back in the office 3 days a week, it may not be that simple for people who've adjusted to working from home. Some people have found it more beneficial, let's say financially, or even just spending more time at home. For those who had to spend days away from their family, they've been able to still be as efficient in doing their work at home as they would if they had to travel elsewhere. So it's just keeping an open mind and realizing what your team's needs are and what everyone's situation is. There's also guidance that's been provided, a manager's toolkit, which covers induction for newcomers and engaging with your team, whether that's you know, even giving them your mobile number in case they have a family issue or a private issue they'd like to discuss with you. Just being a bit more open and understanding of people's situations.
Brilliant, thank you. Phil, you were going to answer that question too. So the role of the leader in addressing those issues as we transition back to the workplace.
Yeah, I think we need to recognise that it's potentially a challenging time for a leader in this environment. You know, as Vim alluded to, there are lots of people that have now not only adjusted to the new ways of working, but this is their new sort of established norm. And with childcare, financially, probably mental well-being, actually, for some, this will be their preferred option. And we need to understand it from an individual perspective. So what is right for that individual, and also understand what the business needs are. And I think there will be a tension between understanding what the business needs and what the individual wants, and we need to find that sweet spot where it works, because I think the leader, there's never going to be a one size fits all, and I think, as Rich mentioned earlier, we're probably not going to get it right first time. So the leader's role, I think, is to sort of constantly assess and reassess the situation and try and work through what will become fair and equitable for all, because it won't be what works for me won't work for Richard, what works for Richard won't work for Vim, and it won't work next week as it did this week. So I think it's a challenging time for a leader. I suspect that we're all going through very similar challenges, and I do believe that if we look after our people in the right way, in time they will be able to come to a good conclusion about where they need to do their work from, rather than being continually led to do that.
Yeah, thank you. Richard, anything else to add to that particular question? What's the NDA doing in that space?
So there's some really good answers in there. I think I really like Vim's point about the leader being transformation. I think linked into that, I think it's really important that the leader's there to help drive some of that communication and engagement, reinforcing that vision and mission statement so that you've got that North Star that the organization's focused on. But help to set the culture. You know, we talked earlier about some of the challenges, meeting some of the challenges. The leader's right, you know, central to meeting some of those challenges and setting the tone for the rest of the organization. I think that's the key thing. I don't think we always get it right. I think sometimes, you know, we maybe miss a trick, especially on the communication side. So trying to focus on, you know, there's no one size that fits all. So as Phil says, so how do you try and cater for some of that and provide different means of communication, different means of engagement, I think is a really key point. I think the thing that we're doing specifically in the NDA that's linked into this is really having an extra focus on new starters. You know, we're doing some work refreshing the induction. We've got buddies that people can tap into. We do check-ins. We've got informal meetings. And we've got things like exec breakfasts to try and answer any Q&As that people might have. And I think, it's just another layer of support that we're putting in place now, which perhaps we didn't have to do to quite such the same extent pre-COVID.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. So moving on to the next point then is about how we can maintain or create an inclusive culture in this hybrid working environment. You've mentioned, Phil and Vim, that you've got some people that are sort of, at the work face, if you like, they can't do their jobs from home, but then you've got a group of people that are doing their jobs from home. So how do we sort of maintain or create that inclusive culture to make sure everyone feels like they're included and part of it? Any thoughts?
I would say at the moment we have Teams and we've got Skype as well. So whenever there needs to be a meeting, a room is booked, a conference room, and there's also the option for people to dial in, obviously depending on the classification of the meeting. If it's not highly classified, people can dial in, and that's worked because you actually get more people in attendance, because you have people with different priorities at different locations, but you're still able to get the right people in the room face to face, as well as dialing in. It's worked well for myself because my team, as I said, some of them are at Devonport. They're able to speak to the suppliers face to face. Any issues, I always go there when required. Otherwise, we are in constant dialogue using that sort of media. However, just like Richard said, we also have quizzes just to get everyone together, the wider team, not just the engineering team, the corporate function, and also informal coffees to make where people can talk about work or even just what they've been up to. And anyone who's sort of, is new to the team, that's a way of getting to know others who you might have never spoken to or met just in the meetings that you're scheduled to attend.
Yeah, because I know there must be situations where people have joined new organizations and they've not met anyone yet in person, because for the whole period that they've joined the organization, they're actually been, working remotely. So it's about sort of making sure they don't feel isolated. So all those are good, inclusion activities. What about yourself, Phil?
Yeah, similar to Vim, I think there's been a lot of good ideas how to include people digitally, and I think as we've grown used to the technology and we've matured our use of it, one that stands out for me is we've established something called coffee roulette, which is a bit like a version of speed dating. So you sign up to it, and every week you get a new partner to have a virtual coffee with, which I think is nice. Lots of different podcasts, recorded briefs, live briefs by senior managers, all different things. And again, I think a lot of that works. I am left a little thoughtful around, though, despite our best efforts, there will inevitably have been some level of exclusion felt by individuals around the organisation, because for all the good that you can do digitally, there are some aspects that you just cannot replicate other than by being there physically in person. So I suppose as a result of being involved in this panel today, I'm just thoughtful around who and how might people have been excluded in the last 18 months, and what do we need to do now to reconnect with those people in a more meaningful way. Don't have the answer to all that, but I think if you look at it from the opposite end of exclusion, rather inclusion, it might highlight some gaps that we've created unintentionally.
Yeah, thank you. So moving on to the next question, this is about how do you feel the transition to remote working has affected inclusion? So along those lines that you were just touching on there, Phil, and is a move to greater flexibility compatible with inclusive workplace? So, you mentioned that you've got sort of separate groups of people, some that have to do their jobs on site, some that can work remotely. So just thinking through that question, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's had a real mixed impact. So I think we've got some staff who feel more excluded by it, and I think that it takes a lot of effort to include everybody. So that's a greater ask of the organisation. But I also think it has provided some real opportunities to create a more diverse workforce. Previously, we recruited, I think, from fairly tight locations around the UK. Now, you know, with this hybrid working environment, you've got the opportunity to fish from a greater pool, I guess, of resources and people, and recruit more people in. I think that we sort of touched on it earlier around the people feeling excluded in meetings. I think that takes real discipline to stop that from happening. But I think there's also the danger that it goes the other way, and that drives a fear of missing out type arrangement where people feel that they've got to be present and in the room to be engaged and part of the discussion. And that goes back to Phil's point right at the start of the session, where you don't want to be driving back to the old ways of working. We want to try and bottle up what we've got and really make it work. On a personal perspective, I did loads of traveling pre-COVID in a different organization, but I was commuting every single day, doing sort of 4 or 5 hours of traveling. We've got some very hard greening targets, environmental targets that as an organization we need to meet. And I think that this hybrid working provides us a real opportunity to meet some of those. So you effectively sort of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. We meet our environmental commitments, but also drive better working practices and what have you, as well as trying to create a more diverse workforce. And I think that you know, Phil made a point, you know, it's not just about doing the work, you know, workplaces provide a social element as well. And I think we need to be alive to that, so that, you know, the best organizations that are doing this are really trying to cater for that element, as well as driving productivity and inclusivity. But it's trying to actually create that diverse culture that drives the organization further forward.
Yeah, I really like the point you made, Richard, around actually it's given us the opportunity to increase diversity in some instances, because you know, 18 months and 1 day ago, if you'd have asked each of us, would it be possible for this job to be done from home, would have probably said no. And then 18 months plus 1 day and minus 1 day, we said, yeah, we can. And that's meant that we've been able to open up the opportunity to people that it wouldn't previously been there. So those limited potentially with childcare or caring needs or other specific needs or constrained by time now can actually fulfill a meaningful role in our organisations that they couldn't previously. But I do think, as if you just look at our diversity inclusion ambitions, I do sense that they might have just dropped slightly off the highest of the agenda in recent times, because we have been working more focused on the how do we manage the working arrangements and how do we continue to run our businesses. And you can see it's just not been maybe as high a priority as it ought to have been. But the question, is it compatible? Absolutely yes. We just need to get it back on the agenda and do it in the round. So we're thinking about business performance, we're thinking about where people work and why, and how do we include as many people as we can in that debate. And I think it's absolutely doable. So yeah.
Thank you. That sort of leads me nicely on to a question around unequal working practices. You know, and you've touched on this before, where some people have to go into the office and some people can sort of work from home. You know, how has that sort of, you know, due to the nature of their work, how has that sort of manifested itself in your organizations?
So in our organization, for people who are in security jobs, high security jobs, they know the nature of their job and that there's no other way. So I think they've accepted it. However, on a case-by-case basis, managers could try and give their teams work-related jobs that they can do at home occasionally. So, however, for example, our security guards aren't able to work from home unless, I guess, they do some kind of training, which is possible. So I think like there would be maybe just ways of trying to incentivize those who have to go in, because obviously when we started, everyone was afraid of their health and nobody was really sure of what was going on. But now that there's more information out there and there's a lot of measures put in place to avoid spreading infections, and more people are transitioning back to the office, I think those people are now, I mean, they have an option to change jobs, rethink what they're doing if they wanted a bit more flexibility. But it's been managed on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you, Vim. Phil, Richard, anything? Go on.
I think it's, as leaders, we need to be relatively, I don't know if it's brave or courageous, and recognise that there will be unequal, or not unfair, unequal working practice, because for the work that we do, there are some people that you just have to be physically present. You know, in my organisation, we're constructing a nuclear power plant. Unfortunately, with the best will in the world, we can't do that from our lounges or bedrooms, can we? So, and I think Richard hit the nail on the head earlier. If you can link what people do to the mission or the North Star or whatever, you know, your goals and values are, most people recognise that, and they're bought into the objectives and what we're trying to achieve, and recognise where they need to be. So I am really open with my people that yes, it will be unequal, but it will be fair based on the role that you undertake. And to Vim's point, where adjustments can be made, where you can change people's roles subtly to give them more flexibility, we'll do that. And where we can't, you've got to incentivize people and motivate them to carry on doing the work, you know, 9 to 5, 5 days a week, and that's just the nature of their role. So I think rather than maybe perhaps sugarcoating it and pretending that we can have flexibility in all roles, we've just got to be honest with people. And so far, it's been a challenge, but in my organisation, albeit in a slowed down way, we've managed to continue construction of the power plant every day during COVID. That might only be small numbers of people, but it hasn't yet stalled, which I think is a real positive.
Yeah. I know there were times during, Richard, there were times during the pandemic where, you know, people working from home were desperate to get back into the office and have some social interaction. And then there were times where people were actually working on a plant or at site and they wanted to be at home. You know, it's grass is greener. Go on, Richard.
I agree. So I agree entirely. And I think that, you know, it's the danger of that perception of what's unequal, isn't it? So, you know, remote work might be seen as a bit of a sort of shiny thing at the moment, but as you said just then, you know, people have been desperate to have some interaction with their work colleagues. So, so it's not the be all and end all. I think we also need to be, you know, we need to be robust and fairly grown up with people, I think, around expectations of roles. And this fits with Phil's point. You know, there are different ways of recognizing and being rewarded, and people get kudos from some of the roles that they do. Certainly, you know, in the military, where I served for, you know, about 18 years, when I was on operations and going out on patrols, I didn't ever think that I was doing a more unfair job than the chef that was back at the camp making my meals. I was thankful that there was a guy back at the camp who was going to be supporting me after when I got back. And I think that we shouldn't be, you know, we shouldn't be scared of pointing out some of these sort of differences to people across our workforce, to say how everybody fits together to meet that mission and works together. And I say, find kudos in the roles that we're all doing, and recognize that we're all contributing in different ways.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry, Vicky, the other point I would make there as well, it's something that I can't attest to have mastered just yet. But if you, what you want to try and, we need to try and do, I think, is link what it is we're trying to achieve to how and where people do their work overtly as leaders. So if a person, as you said, you know, the chef needs to be in the kitchen because that's where he does his job, but linking that to the why and what he's delivering, suddenly it gives people such a sense of purpose. Whereas another person who may be, I don't know, a document author, it's perfectly practical for them to be able to do their work from home, and they can understand that and know how they contribute. But you could have the document author and the chef understanding each other's perspective as well quite easily. It just takes really constant and overt communication, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So moving on to the final question of this afternoon. So it's around mandating returning to the workplace. So should we mandate returning to the workplace arrangements or leave it to line managers to decide? So what are your views and thoughts on that?
Personally, I think that's quite tricky because organizations are quite reluctant in that everyone's role is different. So there's no one solution that fits everyone. So if they were to say everybody should return to work at least 1 day a week or 4 times a month, I think there needs to be a good reason for it. Nobody wants to go in the office and just to be on Skype all day, because that's not productive. So if they need to incentivize people, so have team meetings, have a project maybe that allows people to go in and do meaningful work in the office, rather than just make it as a blanket statement. And if they were to leave it to managers to decide, a manager could decide, well, I want my team to be back 3 days a week. And then obviously there'll be some willing to do that and there'll be some reluctant. And then, that becomes a difficult situation for the manager to try and resolve, because then they have to start treating their team differently, depending on, different situations. However, I would say if the organization gave some kind of guidance, which the team leader can follow or hang on to, and say, look, we still need to make an effort to go in, rather than if there was no guidance at all, I think there'll be a lot of resistance.
Yeah, absolutely agree. We've done the same. So the answer I gave is yes, but. So we've mandated a set of principles, and then it's down to the individual leader or line manager to determine how he adopts those principles within some boundaries. I think if you don't provide any guidance, you're potentially leaving a line manager or a leader very exposed, because if I say 1 day a month and you say 5 days a week, that's quite a broad spectrum, isn't it? And we're going to get some very unhappy people. Whereas if we know that all of us is working within some set boundaries, I think that enables us to get the best for the employees and also the best for the team, and also then best business outcomes. So mine's definitely, we need to mandate something, but not specifically the number of days or hours, etc.
And I think so. Sorry, yeah. Go on, Richard.
So I was going to say, I agree entirely. I think, we've taken a similar approach, and trying to encourage managers and staff to have a discussion about what the needs of the business, or how the needs of the business might be met, as well as their own personal needs, I think is really important. And you can manage what are going to be the cultural norms for that team collectively, to see how they all might work together. So they might all agree, for example, to come in the office every other Tuesday, because that works for most of the people, and actually it gives them an opportunity to interact. I think there's an element of, you've got to put it in the hands of people to give them some of the positive spin-offs, like empowerment and trust, and really driving a positive culture. But at the same time, as Phil and Pim said, really setting some principles that people can follow, and it acts as almost a handrail and guidance for people, is really important, so that you don't find that people are either disappointed either way, whether that's the business or the individuals.
I think if people have got a purpose for going in the office, rather than I've just got to go in 2 days a week, for what? Yeah. I know in some workplaces people might go into an office and not actually see any of their team members. They'll just be with a collection of other workers from other departments who just happen to be in on that day. And then then you sort of think, okay, well, what's the benefit of going in? All right, I've had a water cooler conversation, and that's helped my mental health. I was talking to my neighbour the other day, and when she first went back into the office, she had no end of IT trouble. So so I think that's a challenge in itself, isn't it? When you feel like you've got a good home set up, everything's working fine, and then you have to sort of pack it all away, take it back into the office. So I think there's some challenges and practicalities around those IT issues as well. So
I think
go on, Phil.
And I think the dynamic of the team has potentially been overlooked a little bit in recent times, and you can probably use that as a little bit of incentivization to get people. If you, as Richard said, you give it to the team to decide, you'll probably find that you get them all back in on the same days because they want to see each other. the pro of that is that you get a team working at the same location on the same day, and suddenly it all starts to come true, doesn't it? Whereas if I agree with each of you individually what you're going to do, how does that end up being what's best for the team? So I think you can really start to empower people, as Richard said earlier.
Yeah,
I think it's a really important point, and I think that there's an element of what works for me as an individual. I might be perfectly happy sitting at home with a dog at my feet, coffee on tap, but I also recognize that there are people who aren't in those sort of situations, and so going into the office and having interactions with their work colleagues, people who are young, earlier in their careers, who need to be developed and mentored in a much more structured way. You can't really do that with everyone working remotely. So there's things like that, trying to sort of tap into what is it that the team needs as well as what the individuals need, as Phil says, is a really important part of it.
I just wanted to add that I'm part of the Race and Culture Network for SDA and DNS. And the network has been doing a lot of good work in reviewing some policies, some equality, diversity, and also leadership. And I think because there is now this hybrid working, it's now possible to be heard, to reach out to a wider audience. They've managed to put together some talks where people can come in, and external speakers, and all levels are welcome. People can just dial in, and they've had really good uptake of this. And because race has been a hot topic for the past few months, our organization is doing all they can to address it. So technology and this hybrid working has really been good in actually addressing that issue.
yeah. And Phil made the point earlier, didn't he, about we don't want to lose any of that, all of those, the good things that have come out of utilizing the technology, exploiting it to its best. Who'd have thought we would have been in this situation? So I don't think we want to lose any of that. And if it's extended the reach, I think that's a really important point. Phil, Vim was just talking about the Race Equality Network where she works, and that they've managed to utilize the technology and getting in guest speakers, and not wanting to lose those benefits in the future. So I think that's a really important point. It's given us that good reach. And who'd have thought financial services would have the opportunity to work at home? Traditional bank working, they would have never done that. You made that point earlier, Phil, about ask that question, can this job be done from home? And it would have been a flat no.
Well, we wouldn't have done this. We would look at what we're doing today. So if we were going to arrange a panel like this previously, we'd have had to do it face to face, which is difficult in itself. And I'm looking around, at least 2 of us are working from home today. So if we just said, okay, I'm going to do it from my bedroom or my lounge, we said, oh, that won't work. But it's working absolutely perfectly, isn't it? So if we can it gives potential to get really different and diverse people to speak at events when you don't physically need to be there. So I think there's many opportunities to expand that.
Yeah. Brilliant. Any final thoughts from you about the topic this afternoon, which was really around about the hybrid working, inclusive, workplaces, and the leader's role in that? Any final thoughts?
Just that I think that it's a difficult problem to solve, and I think there's organisations around the world that are still struggling with this. So giving ourselves time to test and adjust and change tack if that's appropriate, I think is a really important point that we need to take on board. And it's probably part and parcel of this reimagined way of working. Agile approach, it means that if it doesn't work, you change direction, don't you?
Yeah.
I'm trying to see it, and this has inspired me a bit today as well. It's not a problem to solve, is it? It's an opportunity to leverage. So if you take it with that mindset and build on the positives, then be absolutely insistent that we don't need to go back to previous ways of working. I think there's no right answer. We'll do things week on week that'll improve the situation. We'll get it wrong as many times as we get it right, but that is okay, isn't it? And just be confident and comfortable to make mistakes in what we do.
Yeah. Any final thoughts, Vim?
I was just going to say that I think we should definitely embrace the benefits of hybrid working. However, we shouldn't use it as an excuse or a barrier to get people together, because that could, defeat the objective of being more inclusive. Yes, you're trying to make people more inclusive by being flexible, but then if some people then use it as, an excuse not to go in the office, even just like you say, to help out with new people. There's a lot of new graduates out there who are raring to go, and if no one experienced was in the office, I think it would make them feel a little bit down and not necessarily put as much effort into the work as they would if they had that face-to-face engagement with the rest of the team.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Just want to thank you, panel, for your insights into the topic this afternoon. So Phil, Vim and Richard, thank you so much for your time this afternoon and your insights into the topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.